Greetings everyone, welcome to another video. Umber Rays here today looking at Elena, the newest character to be added to the JP side. And if you're still watching the WOTV videos, bless ya. But today, the big thing that we're going to be doing is a little bit different, because normally what we do is we look at all the data from WOTV Calc and then we do a test video after. Well, today it's going to be switched and swapped, mostly because Elena data didn't come to WOTV Calc for whatever reason. I'm not too terribly sure why, but it is essentially the way it is. So let's just jump right in and start going at it. We already have her in the party, and yes, my Lapis resources are incredibly low because I hate Zac with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. Right. We've looked at the past before about these characters in this type of setting, and we generally know the stats that we are looking at for this group of characters, both defensive and offensive. But the big thing with any new offensive characters, whether or not they will actually be good enough to really make a splash in meta. Elena being a 100 cost certainly makes that interesting. Here you can see her stats. Not terribly amazing HP or offensive capability, but not bad considering the grouping that she is in for here. 1400 attack and 96 accuracy does stand out a little bit to me, mainly because it does kind of come very close to matching Ashen Mont. But also the speed of 113 without the Hermes sandals is kind of a nice surprise, and 39 single target with 12 AoE paints a picture of what she will be generally good at. Of course, future builds will probably be better, but still, again, interesting for what we're looking at. As for resistances, good against slashing, good against magic, so-so against other stuff. More noteworthy is the piercing resistance, since her counter also works against piercing. And hey, curse resistance, nice. This is probably going to be important for something very soon. Other things to note is that we've talked previously, her commander ability affecting the opponent's team is pretty unique, and maybe one of the things that actually outshines this character's main kit, given what could happen. So let's also take a look real quickly at some other stuff. First off, an apology. Apparently it is a pink gun, so that is lore accurate. But they made this gun essentially good for Elena in general, and only Elena, with physical human killer attack up by 15, weakness resistance of 10, and a magic damage reduction of 5%, increasing to a maximum of 15% the further the target is away. So Elena is actually kind of just naturally a little bit better against magic with the equipment that we're seeing. And that will be curious whether that really makes a difference, since yes, there are mage teams, but the biggest teams right now with Zac are physical, and that's not exactly where Elena's specialties are looking. As for the Trust Mastery, a little bit of speed on it, but the ability is the interesting thing. HP absorption for not only herself, but allies as well as a effect that when a attack hits, you remove CT up for a little bit. Lots of CT shenanigans going on lately, so that is curious. It also means that Elena's Trust Mastery counters other Elenas, which could, well, specifically like her and Tifa's CT up off of their limit bursts could be prevented by this from an opponent having this. So Elena maybe self-checks herself. The only other things I really want to mention quickly before going into this, we see Odin is here. We see that there are some interesting vision cards pushing DPS options here. Her counter is actually a pretty far range, and specifically counters magic and piercing type of attacks, which, once again, Moore is a unit that does exist out there, and she is really, really good still. And there are plenty of good mage units. Whether this is good enough, I don't know, but a preemptive counter is always interesting as far as I'm looking at her support base skills. We can see for how she is built. First one here is an increase in accuracy, defense penetration rate, single target attack resistance penetration rate, and when HP falls below 50%, recovers a certain percentage, medium, one time, grants an additional effect of increasing physical damage if under raise effect. Nice little support skill that actually is just really good from the start of any battle. Also, that increased accuracy, probably she'll be okay against any evade scum, in case you absolutely hate. As for this one, well, you can probably guess a little bit. This is her other main job, which is kind of nice that it is included on here. Area attack resistance up, as well as range +1. So next, let's go in to our actual map, turning off auto, and see if this character measures up in any way, shape, or form to some actual expectations. And it's curious, with Rufus coming, I think that will be some interesting support for her, given that she does have some strike attacks, but mostly it does seem to be gun-based attacks. I'm curious whether that will effectively determine her long-term value of whether or not she needs another limited character to be absolutely insane. If that's the case, then that probably hurts her evaluation more than most other things. But yeah, we'll wait and see. So over here, we'll bring Shrekken. We'll let her do her buffs. We'll also let, Elena's turn. So really quickly, we've done a lot of buffs with other characters. We cannot access her limit burst right from the get-go, but we can see some other attacks that she does have. For example, against Hero King Mont, a defensive tank, pretty nice DPS right off the get-go, considering even though he hasn't exactly done too much buffing. But also here, this ability, taking a interesting first look, because it does seem to be getting through some of the other stuff. Removes all buffs from targets, deals dark damage, and absorbs a portion of the damage dealt. So that is actually getting through some of defensive capabilities. As a matter of fact, even a 65% against evasion's AC or light evasion AC Sephiroth is pretty good. And the DPS here is pretty nice. Not so good against Shrekken, who seems to be countering it very well, but actually pretty good against multiple sources of characters here. So we'll just fire off a few other attacks, taking a look at her DPS very quickly. Seems pretty nice. And also her triple hit ability, which is another one. Seems that she's very capable of dealing some good damage to most characters, at least from what we've seen so far. So let's take a look at her support skills to build up the AP that we will need to access that limit burst. So first off, this one, definitely a bit of a long one. For 4 turns, when an ally other than the user takes damage from an attack ability, the unit which has the effect applied will perform a follow-up attack. Debuff resistance down for 3 turns, no chain effects, and the user will not receive damage more than twice at once. So lots of interesting stuff here. I think there is more, but things I really want to touch on quickly. We have a specific Yuna style buff. That's right, Yuna's buff has actually been applied to Elena of shooting a follow-up attack when another unit who has been buffed with this ability attacks. So it's Yuna from X2's ability again. Non-elemental damage very small. Debuff resistance down for 3 turns and no chain effect, so overall pretty good. And then just taking a look at a little bit of the lower half of the ability. Increase CT small 3 times when self receives damage more than twice at once. Reduces damage received further away. It is for 4 turns. So an interesting series of buffs that works off of another unit. Pretty interesting that they've decided to give her a follow-up style attack, making her a dark version of Yuna. Yuna was pretty powerful when she first launched, but kind of has fallen off since then. A little bit of a resurgence with some of the new light characters coming in and being also pretty strong. but it'll be interesting to see how Dark makes use of it, and whether or not this is going to be a straight out replacement for Yuna is yet to be seen. But yes, some nice little things there. Also, the interesting thing about the reduction, if you're hit twice or more, that is an effect that is potentially going to be cancelled in the future, so valuation on that is interesting at best. Our other ability here, which will work on buffing targets, once again, a little bit of a long one, so bear with me while we read through this. Increases mental debuff resistance rate of allies within range for 4 turns, grants effective ceiling targets re-raise effect cancellation for 3 turns when an attack hits, grants re-raise for herself, spike damage, which activates 4 times, which basically reflects a small portion of the damage being dealt to her, will undoubtedly help with recovery. However, I'm not super crazy about this because once again, other units are already canceling this, so this is a nice to have, but as we've seen, it's not the most amazing thing. Next up, also 4-turn automatic AP recovery medium, and physical damage taken the further away the target is. Is reduced and grants haste effect for yourself if you have the raise effect active. So if we just activate this one, because it is pretty interesting, we can see we get that AP reduction and everything in there, and we can just kind of continue on. So we're going to activate the rest of the buffs that we want to do. All right, and that should be pretty much it. We should be ready to go here. And now going back to Elena. So interesting that we do have all of those buffs active. We can take a look at her and see if her stats have changed too terribly much, and not really. A little bit interesting here that we do have just that 113 seed bill, not looking at any extra resistance or from her buffs or anything like that, so seems fine. We will bring her over, just fire off that secondary buff so we can see the effects. And now we'll try firing off some attacks against her. First off, a magic based attack, seeing what she will actually looking at here. So 100% chance of a counter based ability, 2,920 damage off of Gilgamesh's Limit Burst. Feels like it's falling quite hard. And this AoE attack, well, it's doing pretty good damage. It's not doing super great damage. Even single target feels like it's falling a little bit short of stages. So let's jump ahead, test out Ashen Moths. And here, once again, still being pretty resilient against our single target AoE damage. Even with multiple attacks being tested on her, seems like her damage reduction is pretty good, at least for this testing. Again, with Sephiroth here, should be a pretty big reduction. Yeah, only 20% chance of curse, so she should be pretty safe in combination with some of the other curse aura style effects that prevent curse. Going to be really nice for just keeping her nice and healthy, not having to worry, and making sure that HP absorption effect is probably put to good use. Thank you, Sora. That is very, very true. Probably is supper, isn't it? Sorry, Cat, right in the middle of recording the video. But yeah, seems okay. So let's start. We want to start dealing some damage to this character to see what kind of effects we're looking at. Let me just figure out which one I kind of want to do. We'll just fire this off. So we can see some of the damage that we're doing there. Also, we saw that CT boost, potentially boosting her up. If we even try just some of the... Now, that's a pretty big hit right there. 6,000 off of the Limit Burst is pretty rough. And yeah, maybe Greatsword going to be a little bit scary for her to fight, especially with Zack out there right now and the Light Element. Let's pass along. Let's move over here and let's see how some of her abilities have changed in terms of DPS. Yeah, barrier breakers not doing particularly well here, as barriers are standing pretty strong, even though it seems like the DPS is generally pretty nice. See if we can't get through some of these barriers. This ability, a little bit too close, so let's move out a little bit. There we go. That's a nice ability right there. This select to target, and it does look like it can get through actual HP barriers, which is really good. Greatly reduces reaction activation rate for 2 turns. For 2 targets, sorry, for 3 turns. Reduces single target resistance by a percentage. Reduces impact attack resistance. Strike, basically. And greatly reduces healing power. So some nice offensive capability there in that ability. But most of our abilities don't have actual ways through HP barriers. Even though the DPS does look really, really solid here, and I do think it actually looks really, really solid. Follow-up attacks are generally also a nice addition to her kit. I am a little bit curious about exactly how well she will be against, or just in terms of survivability against what other characters might be doing. So that's probably my biggest concern right now. But taking a look at this limit burst, really, really powerful against certain characters who do not have good defensive options. And other characters, middling, but still very, very solid, I think, for it. Let's try firing it off just against King Mont. It's a good amount of DPS, and we'll just go back to seeing if we can't take her down a peg or 2. If we can't get that HP restore, about 4,000 HP, not bad. So just, and don't worry, I'll show the limit burst animation after this. But yeah, Elena's pretty interesting for a lot of reasons. She is an interesting mix of old and new characters with multiple damage types that can be very powerful, as we've seen. She's also an interesting counter position where so many characters are just anti-magic, anti-sword. Here she is anti-pierce and anti-mage, which is at least a little bit different and could be actually really valuable depending on what the future meta looks like. Also, her commander ability is one of the most interesting abilities we've come across, potentially causing poison on the opponent from the very get-go. She has an increase of range, good speed, and some nice offensive capabilities as well. I'm pretty happy with the way Elena looks, at least for the moment. Don't know if she will ever end up amounting to too terribly much, but there is some good stuff there. Nice to know that they did not shortchange her and put her into like a 90 cost character into a 100 cost spell. So yeah, just really quickly, we'll show off, if I can hit the right buttons, the animation for the Turk 2-step. And yeah, I'll do a more thorough data, a little bit more concise data review once the data is actually up on WOTV Calc, and then we'll make a judgment call into how good Miss Elena is in the near future. But for now, looking pretty cool from at least where I'm sitting. Also, pink gun. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. See you later.